What if your inability to focus isn't your fault? In Stolen Focus, Johann Hari reveals how your attention is being hijacked by technology, stress, diet, pollution, and even the way our world is designed. It's not just about social media or bad habits. There are deeper forces at play. But here's the good news. You can take back control. In this summary, we'll break down the 12 biggest threats to your focus and how to fight back. Let's dive in. Chapter 1. In this chapter, Johann Hari delves into the first major cause of the modern attention crisis, the relentless increase in speed, task switching, and information filtering. The chapter begins with a vivid personal anecdote of Hari's attempt to completely disconnect from the internet for 3 months. He recalls an interaction with a confused Target employee while trying to purchase a phone that had no internet access. This anecdote sets the stage for a broader discussion on how our digital environment has become so ingrained in our daily lives that removing oneself from it seems almost unfathomable. Hari introduces the concept of speed addiction, explaining that in today's world, information moves at an unprecedented pace, and our brains struggle to keep up. He argues that people are increasingly pressured to consume, process, and respond to information faster than ever before. This acceleration leads to a loss of depth in thinking, as people no longer take the time to fully process or contemplate the information they consume. Instead, they skim, scroll, and move on, engaging in a form of intellectual fast food that prevents deeper engagement and critical thinking. The chapter also discusses how multitasking, or rather, task switching, plays a key role in the deterioration of attention spans. Research cited in the book suggests that switching between tasks, checking emails, responding to messages, scrolling social media, creates a cognitive drain, leading to a fragmented and superficial engagement with work and life. Hari highlights studies showing that people believe they can multitask efficiently, but in reality, every switch comes with a switching cost that reduces overall productivity and focus. He illustrates this with real-life examples and psychological experiments that reveal how the human brain is not designed to handle multiple streams of attention-demanding input at once. Filtering, the third aspect of this cause, refers to how our brains are forced to filter an overwhelming amount of digital noise, choosing what to focus on and what to ignore. However, as Hari points out, the sheer volume of information in the modern age makes this process exhausting and inefficient. Our ability to prioritize important information is compromised, leading to a state of constant distraction. Social media algorithms exacerbate this problem by bombarding users with endless, carefully curated streams of content designed to keep them engaged, but not necessarily informed. Hari concludes by reflecting on his own experiences, attempting to disconnect and focus on a singular task. He emphasizes that escaping the cycle of speed, switching, and filtering is not just about personal willpower, but about restructuring our environments to allow for deeper, uninterrupted focus. He suggests that by acknowledging the external forces shaping our attention, we can begin to reclaim our ability to think deeply and meaningfully. Chapter 2. In this chapter, Hari explores how the modern world has disrupted one of the most essential cognitive states for deep thinking and creativity, flow. Flow states, as originally studied by psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, refer to periods of intense focus and immersion where an individual becomes fully absorbed in a task. Hari argues that the ability to enter and sustain these states is being systematically eroded by the very structure of contemporary life. Hari shares his personal struggle with attention and distraction, describing his time in Provincetown, where he hoped to reconnect with deep reading and creativity. Instead of effortlessly falling into flow, he found himself instinctively reaching for his phone, craving the constant stimulation that the internet provided. This initial discomfort highlights how deeply ingrained digital habits have become and how difficult it is to detach from the constant demand for attention. The chapter discusses the science behind flow states and why they are crucial for creativity, productivity, and even happiness. Studies show that individuals who regularly experience flow tend to perform better in their fields, whether in sports, music, writing, or problem solving. However, flow requires a specific set of conditions: uninterrupted time, deep engagement, and a challenging but achievable task. Modern technology disrupts these conditions by fragmenting attention through constant notifications, endless scrolling, and the rapid consumption of short-form content. Hari references research on digital addiction and the way social media, with its infinite scroll and instant feedback loops, conditions users to seek short bursts of dopamine rather than sustained engagement. This, he argues, makes it harder for people to enter flow states as their brains become wired for quick rewards rather than prolonged focus. He illustrates this with examples from various professionals, including artists and academics, who report that their ability to concentrate deeply has been significantly weakened over time. One of the most striking sections of the chapter describes how technology companies deliberately design their products to disrupt flow. Social media platforms, video games, and even news websites employ engagement-maximizing strategies that prioritize compulsive interaction over meaningful engagement. Hari critiques the tech industry for creating an environment where distraction is the norm and deep focus is the exception. The chapter concludes with a reflection on the broader consequences of a society that has lost its ability to sustain flow. When people struggle to focus for long periods, innovation, critical thinking, and even personal fulfillment suffer. Hari argues that restoring the ability to enter flow is not merely an individual challenge, but a collective necessity. He suggests that one way to combat this issue is by deliberately creating environments that minimize digital distractions and encourage deeper engagement with meaningful activities. Chapter 3. Hari shifts the focus to another major cause of the attention crisis, the exhaustion epidemic. He opens with a personal account of his struggles with sleep and fatigue, painting a vivid picture of how modern lifestyles have led to chronic exhaustion. He describes how, during his retreat in Provincetown, he experienced an unfamiliar sensation, waking up feeling truly rested. This moment led him to investigate how widespread sleep deprivation and physical exhaustion contribute to declining attention spans. He discusses how industrialized societies have systematically undermined the conditions necessary for proper rest and recovery. The modern work culture glorifies busyness, encouraging people to sacrifice sleep in the name of productivity. However, studies show that sleep deprivation has severe consequences on cognitive function, including impaired focus, memory loss, and increased susceptibility to distractions. Hari references research showing that even moderate sleep deprivation can reduce cognitive performance to the level of being legally intoxicated. Beyond sleep, he explores how stress and anxiety have become chronic conditions for many people. The pressure to constantly perform, stay connected, and meet societal expectations creates a state of hyperarousal, making it difficult for the brain to enter deep focus. Hari explains that the human brain was not designed for the constant onslaught of information, deadlines, and digital stimuli it faces today. As a result, people experience mental fatigue, which manifests as an inability to concentrate, reduced motivation, and emotional instability. A particularly compelling part of the chapter examines the physiological effects of screen exposure before bed. Blue light emitted from screens disrupts melatonin production, delaying sleep onset and reducing sleep quality. The book highlights how social media and digital entertainment encourage people to stay awake longer, further exacerbating the exhaustion crisis. Hari concludes by emphasizing that solving this issue requires a societal shift. Encouraging healthier work-life balances, promoting the importance of sleep, and redesigning work environments to prioritize well-being are essential steps toward restoring attention. He argues that rest is not a luxury but a fundamental requirement for a functioning mind. Chapter 4. Hari examines how the decline of deep reading has contributed to the widespread attention crisis. He begins with an anecdote about a bookstore in Provincetown, where he met a young woman who, despite her intelligence and access to great literature, admitted that she could only read the first few chapters of books before losing focus. This conversation, he explains, is emblematic of a larger cultural shift away from sustained reading. He presents alarming statistics on declining reading habits. Fewer people read books for pleasure than ever before, and literary fiction sales have plummeted. Studies reveal that people now spend only a fraction of their time reading compared to previous decades, instead dedicating hours to digital consumption. This shift, Hari argues, has profound implications for cognitive development and critical thinking. Hari explores the research of literacy experts who have studied how digital reading differs from deep reading. Online content encourages skimming, scanning, and rapid information consumption, conditioning the brain for short bursts of focus rather than long-term engagement. He explains how this rewiring affects even traditional reading habits, making it harder for people to stay engaged with complex narratives or arguments. The chapter ends with a call to revive deep reading as a cultural priority. Hari argues that books offer one of the last remaining refuges for deep, uninterrupted thinking. By reclaiming the habit of sustained reading, individuals can rebuild their ability to focus, process information critically, and engage with ideas on a deeper level. Chapter 5. In this chapter, Johann Hari explores how the natural state of mind wandering, which has historically been essential for creativity, problem-solving, and deep thinking, is being systematically disrupted in modern society. He begins by challenging the conventional understanding of attention, which has long been dominated by the metaphor of a spotlight, an image that suggests we should focus narrowly on specific tasks, much like an audience captivated by a performer on stage. While this form of attention is crucial, it is only one aspect of a much broader cognitive process that includes mind wandering, a mental state that allows for free-flowing thoughts, unexpected insights, and deeper comprehension. Hari argues that mind wandering is not a distraction, but a fundamental mode of thinking that enables individuals to connect ideas, generate creativity, and develop long-term personal goals. He cites research showing that people who engage in mind wandering are better at organizing their thoughts and making complex decisions. However, modern digital culture has made sustained mind wandering increasingly rare. The endless stream of notifications, emails, and algorithm-driven content keeps people in a constant state of reaction, preventing them from drifting into the unstructured thought processes that are necessary for deep understanding and innovation. He discusses the research of Marcus Rachel, a neuroscientist who helped identify the brain's default mode network, DMN, the neural system that becomes active during periods of rest and introspection. Rachel's work suggests that the DMN is critical for autobiographical memory, creative problem-solving, and making sense of experiences. When people are given time to let their minds wander, they unconsciously process information, make meaning of their lives, and imagine future possibilities. However, the modern world, filled with relentless digital stimulation, suppresses this ability, leading to fragmented thinking and an inability to concentrate deeply on complex tasks. Hari points out that the consequences of this disruption extend beyond personal creativity. There are social and economic costs as well. Without the ability to engage in unstructured thinking, individuals struggle to solve problems that require long-term vision and systemic change. He suggests that the rise of short-form content, such as social media posts and quick entertainment, conditions people to expect immediate gratification rather than the slow, reflective processing that mind-wandering fosters. This shift in cognitive habits contributes to a culture where attention spans are shorter, patience is diminished, and the capacity for sustained intellectual engagement is weakened. To illustrate these points, Hari shares personal anecdotes about his attempts to regain control over his own mental focus. He describes his experience of going on long, uninterrupted walks, where he deliberately avoided digital distractions and allowed his thoughts to flow freely. These moments, he explains, were some of the most intellectually productive of his life, reinforcing the idea that deep thinking requires space and time away from external stimuli. However, he also acknowledges the difficulty of sustaining this practice in a world designed to hijack attention at every turn. Ultimately, this chapter argues that the erosion of mind wandering is not a trivial issue, but a profound shift in the way human cognition functions. Hari warns that if society continues on this trajectory, people will become less capable of innovation, critical thinking, and problem solving. He calls for a reevaluation of how attention is managed, advocating for structural changes that allow individuals to reclaim their cognitive autonomy. This includes policy interventions to regulate the design of attention-grabbing technologies, as well as personal efforts to carve out time for uninterrupted thought. The chapter serves as both a diagnosis of the problem and a call to action, urging individuals and institutions to prioritize practices that nurture rather than deplete the brain's natural ability to wander and explore. Chapter 6. In this chapter, Johann Hari delves into one of the most insidious threats to human attention, the rise of digital technology designed to track, manipulate, and exploit user behavior. He begins by recounting his conversation with James Williams, a former Google strategist who left the tech industry to study how digital platforms are altering human attention. Williams argues that the modern attention crisis is not a personal failing, but the result of an engineered environment that systematically diverts focus for profit. Hari introduces the concept of persuasive technology, a field pioneered by Stanford researcher B.J. Fogg, which explores how digital interfaces can be designed to shape human behavior. Social media companies, news websites, and entertainment platforms use these techniques to maximize user engagement, often by triggering psychological vulnerabilities. Features like endless scrolling, algorithmic recommendations, and push notifications are carefully crafted to exploit cognitive biases, keeping users hooked for longer periods. He highlights how these manipulative tactics extend beyond simple distraction. They actively rewire cognitive habits. Studies show that heavy social media users exhibit decreased impulse control, higher levels of anxiety, and reduced capacity for deep focus. Hari argues that these effects are not incidental, but the result of a business model that prioritizes profit over well-being. Platforms like Facebook and YouTube are financially incentivized to keep users engaged, even if that means promoting sensationalist content, polarizing opinions, and addictive feedback loops. The chapter also explores the ethical implications of data-driven attention hijacking. Hari describes how companies collect vast amounts of personal information to refine their algorithms, predicting and influencing user behavior with increasing precision. This form of surveillance capitalism, as defined by scholar Shoshana Zuboff, turns human attention into a commodity, selling access to advertisers who compete for mental real estate. Hari warns that this model is not just about keeping people scrolling, it has profound consequences for democracy, mental health, and social cohesion. Hari also addresses the illusion of personal control in the digital age. Many people believe they can simply opt out of attention-hacking technologies, but Williams argues that this is akin to trying to avoid pollution by holding one's breath. The problem is systemic, requiring collective action rather than individual discipline. Hari emphasizes that while personal strategies like digital detoxes can be beneficial, they do not address the root causes of the attention crisis. Without regulation and corporate accountability, the manipulation of human focus will continue to escalate. This chapter paints a disturbing picture of how technology companies have created a world where distraction is the default state. Hari argues that reclaiming attention requires recognizing the structural forces at play and pushing for systemic reforms that prioritize cognitive well-being over corporate profit. He calls for stronger data privacy laws, ethical tech design, and a public conversation about the true costs of an economy built on distraction. Chapter 7. Building on the themes of the previous chapter, Johann Hari further explores the mechanisms by which technology companies manipulate human attention. He opens with a thought experiment. What if social media platforms were designed to connect people in meaningful ways rather than keep them scrolling? He describes how companies like Facebook have the technological capacity to help users strengthen real-world relationships, such as notifying them when a friend is nearby, but choose not to implement such features because they do not maximize engagement. Hari argues that this design philosophy reflects the economic incentives driving digital platforms. The longer users stay online, the more data they generate, which in turn allows companies to refine their manipulation techniques. He examines the work of Tristan Harris, another former Google engineer who has become one of the most vocal critics of attention hijacking technology. Harris explains that social media algorithms are designed to prioritize engagement over truth, often amplifying the most emotionally provocative content. This dynamic contributes to the rise of misinformation, outrage culture, and political polarization, as algorithmic systems reward divisive content with greater visibility. The chapter also explores the psychological impact of living in a world where digital platforms dictate so much of human experience. Studies show that people who spend significant time on social media exhibit lower self-esteem, higher anxiety levels, and greater susceptibility to manipulation. Hari emphasizes that these outcomes are not side effects, but features of a system designed to keep users in a perpetual state of distraction. Hari concludes by arguing that tech companies must be held accountable for the consequences of their business models. He advocates for regulatory interventions, public awareness campaigns, and the development of ethical alternatives to mainstream platforms. While he acknowledges that individuals can take steps to reclaim their attention, he stresses that real change will require systemic action to shift the incentives that currently prioritize profit over human well-being. Chapter 8. The concept of cruel optimism is introduced in this chapter to describe the false hope offered by simplistic solutions to deep-rooted societal problems. The author begins by recounting an anecdote from Nir Eyal, a former persuasive technology designer, who realized how distraction was affecting his personal life when his young daughter disappeared from the room while he was engrossed in his phone. This moment of realization led him to reconsider his own relationship with technology. However, despite his personal acknowledgement of the problem, Nir's proposed solutions, such as self-discipline, mindfulness, and digital detox techniques, fall into the category of cruel optimism. These solutions suggest that individuals alone can fix systemic problems, ignoring the reality that technology is deliberately designed to be addictive. The chapter argues that cruel optimism shifts the burden of responsibility from tech companies and policymakers to individuals, making it seem as though lack of discipline or willpower is the root of distraction, rather than the business models that profit from it. This is compared to the way diet culture frames obesity as an individual failing, rather than acknowledging systemic issues such as the widespread availability of processed foods, aggressive marketing, and urban design that discourages physical activity. Just as most diet programs fail because they do not address the deeper structural causes of obesity, self-imposed digital restrictions are often ineffective against an environment engineered to capture and monetize attention. The discussion expands to critique Silicon Valley's general approach to problem solving, which frequently offers superficial fixes while benefiting from the continuation of the problem. The example of corporate mindfulness programs is highlighted, where companies introduce meditation sessions to help employees cope with stress while maintaining the same toxic work conditions that cause the stress in the first place. This reflects a broader pattern of blaming individuals for systemic failures, discouraging collective action that could lead to real change. The chapter also revisits the role of persuasive technology in shaping human behavior, emphasizing that the designers of these systems often do not fully understand or control their creations. The author draws parallels to classic literary tales such as Frankenstein, in which an invention spirals beyond its creator's intent. In testimony before the U.S. Senate, Tristan Harris, one of the key figures advocating for ethical technology, warned that society's ability to address pressing global challenges, such as climate change, is being undermined by the fragmentation of attention and the promotion of conspiracy theories. If people cannot focus long enough to agree on shared truths, the capacity for collective problem-solving erodes. Ultimately, the chapter calls for a shift away from cruel optimism toward authentic optimism, which recognizes that while individual changes are important, they are not sufficient. Real solutions require systemic reforms, including regulation of persuasive technology and changes in corporate incentives. The chapter concludes by urging readers to question narratives that place the blame solely on personal failings and instead push for broader societal changes that address the root causes of the attention crisis. Chapter 9. After extensively studying the causes of the modern attention crisis, the author turns to potential solutions, outlining the first real glimpses of change. He begins by acknowledging the overwhelming power that technology and economic structures hold over our ability to focus, making it clear that solving this crisis is not about individual willpower alone, but about systematic change. One of the key proposals is the idea of banning surveillance capitalism, the practice of collecting and monetizing user data to manipulate behavior. This, he argues, is the root cause of our fractured attention, as companies use sophisticated algorithms to exploit human psychology for profit. The chapter explores historical precedents where society identified harmful industries and chose to regulate them, such as the banning of lead in paint and CFCs in aerosols. The argument is that just as public health measures remove these toxic substances from daily life, we can and must remove surveillance capitalism from our digital landscape. The author discusses the role of Tristan Harris and Aza Raskin, two former tech insiders turned whistleblowers, who believe that the entire business model of the internet needs restructuring to align with human well-being rather than corporate profits. Another major point is the recognition that technology is not inherently bad. It is how it is designed and incentivized that determines its impact. The chapter outlines proposals such as making platforms subscription-based instead of ad-driven, implementing stricter privacy laws, and redesigning interfaces to promote deep engagement rather than endless scrolling. The author also addresses the power of collective action, emphasizing that meaningful change will not come from individuals simply deleting apps or taking occasional digital detoxes. Rather, it requires large-scale political and social efforts to hold corporations accountable. The final section reflects on the urgency of this transformation. Without immediate intervention, the author warns, the attention crisis will deepen, making it even harder for future generations to reclaim focus and deep thinking. He calls for a new wave of activism, dedicated to demanding humane technology, an approach that prioritizes well-being over engagement metrics. Ultimately, the chapter argues that the key to fixing our fractured attention is not retreating from technology, but fundamentally changing the way it operates in society. Chapter 10. The author explores how modern stress levels have created a society constantly on high alert, contributing significantly to the decline of attention spans. While many assume digital distractions are the main culprit, research suggests that stress itself is one of the primary reasons people struggle to focus. A study conducted by the author and the Council for Evidence-Based Psychiatry found that nearly half of respondents cited stress as the biggest factor affecting their attention, ranking above even social media and smartphones. The chapter introduces Dr. Nadine Burke Harris, a pediatrician and former Surgeon General of California, whose work on childhood trauma provides insight into the long-term effects of stress on cognition. Burke Harris discovered that early life stress, particularly from adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, can rewire the brain, making individuals more hypervigilant and less able to concentrate. This stress response mechanism, originally meant to protect against immediate threats, now activates in response to everyday anxieties, such as job insecurity, financial struggles, and social pressures. One of the chapter's key insights is that chronic stress mimics the effects of ADHD, leading to difficulty focusing, impulsivity, and mental fatigue. The author explains that stress heightens vigilance, meaning the brain remains in a state of hyper-awareness, scanning for threats instead of sustaining deep focus. This phenomenon is exacerbated by modern economic and social conditions, where financial instability, longer work hours, and rising living costs leave people in a near-constant state of worry. The chapter also connects the stress epidemic to sleep deprivation. Studies show that stress-induced hypervigilance disrupts sleep patterns, making it harder for individuals to reach the deep, restorative sleep necessary for cognitive function. The result is a vicious cycle. Stress leads to poor sleep, which leads to mental fatigue, which further diminishes attention spans. The author concludes that addressing attention loss requires tackling the systemic causes of stress. This includes advocating for economic reforms that provide greater financial security, promoting workplace policies that reduce burnout, and creating public awareness campaigns that highlight the connection between stress and cognitive health. The chapter emphasizes that without reducing stress levels, any effort to improve focus will be limited in its effectiveness. Chapter 11. This chapter explores real-world examples of societies and organizations that have successfully implemented solutions to counteract the modern attention crisis. The author begins by arguing that much of the contemporary exhaustion and inability to focus stems from an accelerated pace of life. The increasing demand for productivity, coupled with digital overload, has left people mentally drained and unable to engage in deep thinking. However, some places have found ways to push back against this trend. One of the key examples presented is the experiment with the 4-day workweek. The chapter highlights how several companies and even entire countries have tested reducing the standard workweek from 5 days to 4, with overwhelmingly positive results. The case of Microsoft Japan is particularly striking. When the company implemented a 4-day workweek, productivity jumped by 40%, employees reported higher job satisfaction, and burnout rates decreased. Similar experiments in Sweden and New Zealand found that shorter work hours led to increased efficiency, improved focus, and better overall well-being. Another case study focuses on the effects of reducing speed in daily life. The author visits Gothenburg, Sweden, where public initiatives have encouraged slower, more mindful approaches to work and education. By restructuring workflows to prioritize deep focus over multitasking, workplaces in Gothenburg saw significant improvements in employee engagement and performance. Schools that implemented similar strategies, reducing unnecessary homework and emphasizing in-depth learning, reported higher student retention rates and lower anxiety levels. The chapter also discusses the role of urban planning in fostering sustained attention. The author contrasts the fast-paced, hyper-stimulating environment of major cities with smaller, well-designed towns that encourage a slower way of living. He highlights how cities that invest in green spaces, walkable neighborhoods, and policies that discourage overwork create conditions more conducive to focus and mental clarity. The final section examines economic security as a crucial factor in attention restoration. Research shows that financial instability leads to cognitive overload, making it difficult for individuals to concentrate on anything beyond immediate survival. Universal Basic Income (UBI) experiments, such as those conducted in Finland, have demonstrated that providing financial security leads to measurable improvements in cognitive function and decision-making. Participants in these programs reported less stress, better sleep, and a greater ability to engage in meaningful work. The chapter concludes with a call to action, urging societies to rethink their approach to work, education, and urban design. By slowing down, prioritizing well-being, and restructuring economic incentives, it is possible to reverse the attention crisis. The key takeaway is that improving focus is not just an individual responsibility. It requires systemic changes that promote a healthier, less exhausting way of life. Chapter 12. Johan Hari explores how modern diets and environmental pollution contribute significantly to the decline in our ability to focus. He begins with a personal anecdote about spending summers with his Swiss grandparents, who ate primarily homegrown and natural foods. In stark contrast, his upbringing in the UK involved a diet dominated by processed, microwavable meals and fast food. This shift in dietary habits, from nutrient-rich whole foods to highly processed and artificially flavored alternatives, reflects a broader global trend that is not only detrimental to physical health, but also has serious implications for cognitive function and attention. Hari argues that while discussions about diet often focus on obesity and heart disease, the impact of food on brain function has been largely overlooked. Scientists he interviews reveal that modern diets, laden with sugar, artificial additives, and ultra-processed ingredients, create instability in blood sugar levels, leading to fatigue, mood swings, and diminished concentration. Some studies even suggest that highly processed foods interfere with neurotransmitter function, reducing cognitive clarity and attention span. This dietary shift has contributed to a growing crisis where individuals, especially children, struggle to maintain focus due to the lack of essential nutrients needed for optimal brain function. Parallel to diet, Hari examines the role of pollution in damaging cognitive performance. He interviews environmental scientists who explain that air pollution, particularly from car emissions and industrial activities, infiltrates the bloodstream and reaches the brain, causing inflammation and impairing neurological function. Exposure to heavy metals, pesticides, and endocrine-disrupting chemicals in food and water further exacerbates cognitive decline. Some researchers believe that prolonged exposure to these pollutants increases the likelihood of neurodevelopmental disorders, including ADHD. Hari emphasizes that the rise in cognitive struggles cannot be attributed solely to personal failings. External environmental factors are playing a major role in stealing our ability to focus. The chapter underscores the urgency of addressing these twin issues, poor diet and pollution, through both personal lifestyle changes and systemic reforms. While individuals can make healthier food choices and reduce exposure to pollutants where possible, Hari argues that real change requires policy interventions. He highlights efforts by some governments to regulate food production and reduce air pollution, but stresses that much more needs to be done to reverse the damage already inflicted on global attention spans. Without concerted action, the combined assault of processed food and environmental toxins will continue to erode cognitive function, making it increasingly difficult for people to engage in deep, focused thought. Chapter 13. In this chapter, Hari explores the dramatic rise in ADHD diagnoses and the ways in which society has chosen to address this growing issue. He begins by reflecting on a personal observation. Teachers in the UK and the US have reported a sharp increase in children struggling to concentrate, sit still, and engage with lessons. Instead of investigating broader environmental or societal causes, many experts have attributed this trend to a biological disorder requiring medical intervention. Between 2003 and 2011, ADHD diagnoses in the US surged by 43%, with even sharper increases among girls. Britain has followed a similar trajectory, where the number of children receiving ADHD diagnoses and stimulant medications has skyrocketed compared to previous generations. Hari presents multiple perspectives on this issue, emphasizing that while attention difficulties are real, the prevailing narrative that ADHD is primarily a biological disorder is highly contested. He interviews scientists who argue that while some children may have genetic predispositions to attentional challenges, environmental and social factors are far more influential in shaping focus-related struggles. These experts suggest that rising ADHD rates correlate with changes in childhood experiences: more screen time, fewer opportunities for unstructured outdoor play, overstimulation from digital media, poor diet, and increasing academic pressure. One of the most controversial aspects of ADHD treatment is the widespread use of stimulant medications like Ritalin and Adderall. Hari examines how pharmaceutical companies have aggressively marketed these drugs as the primary solution, despite growing concerns about their long-term effects. He shares insights from doctors who believe that medicating children without addressing the root causes, stress, lack of movement, digital overexposure, amounts to treating symptoms rather than solving the underlying problem. While medication can help some children in the short term, it does not address the larger systemic factors contributing to attention struggles. Hari argues that society's response to ADHD reflects a broader cultural trend. Rather than making changes to an environment that harms attention, the focus has been on altering individuals to fit within a system that is itself dysfunctional. He calls for a paradigm shift where efforts to support children with attention difficulties go beyond medication and include lifestyle interventions, changes in education systems, and policies that prioritize mental well-being. Ultimately, this chapter challenges the dominant narrative about ADHD and urges readers to rethink how we approach attention difficulties in both children and adults. Chapter 14. Hari delves into how modern childhood has been reshaped in ways that negatively impact attention spans, particularly through the increasing confinement of children, both physically and psychologically. He contrasts the freedom children once had to explore their surroundings with the highly controlled and restricted environments that define contemporary childhood. Decades ago, children spent much of their time outdoors, engaging in free play, socializing without constant adult supervision, and developing independence. In contrast, today's children are more likely to be confined indoors, spending excessive hours in front of screens, engaging in structured activities, and rarely experiencing unsupervised play. One of the key drivers of this shift is parental fear. Over the past few decades, a culture of risk aversion has led parents to tightly regulate their children's movements, largely due to media-driven anxieties about crime and safety. However, Hari points out that despite these fears, crime rates in many parts of the world have actually declined. The restriction of children's physical freedom has come at a cost. Research shows that unstructured play is crucial for cognitive development, creativity, and emotional regulation. By eliminating opportunities for exploration and autonomy, society has inadvertently diminished children's ability to sustain attention and develop resilience. Another major factor in childhood confinement is the transformation of education systems. Schools have increasingly emphasized standardized testing, reducing time for recess, play, and creative exploration. Many children now spend the majority of their school hours preparing for exams rather than engaging in curiosity-driven learning. This shift has not only heightened stress levels, but has also contributed to declining attention spans, as students are deprived of the variety and movement necessary to maintain focus. Hari argues that the rigid, test-oriented education system is failing to nurture critical thinking and deep concentration. Hari also examines the psychological impact of this confinement, particularly how excessive screen exposure and social media use have replaced real-world interactions. Many children now spend hours scrolling through fast-paced digital content, which conditions their brains to expect constant stimulation and instant gratification. This, in turn, makes it more difficult for them to engage in slow, focused thinking. The confinement of children within digital spaces rather than real-world environments further exacerbates attention problems, as their ability to engage with physical surroundings and social cues diminishes. To reverse these trends, Hari calls for a reintegration of free play, outdoor activities, and a more balanced approach to education. He highlights initiatives in certain communities that have successfully reintroduced autonomy and physical activity into childhood, demonstrating that these changes lead to improved attention spans and overall well-being. Ultimately, this chapter makes a compelling case that in order to restore children's ability to focus, society must allow them the freedom to explore, play, and interact with the world in a way that supports cognitive development rather than stifling it. Your focus is under attack, but now you know the truth. What was your biggest takeaway? Drop a comment below. And if you're ready to reclaim your mind, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. The battle for attention isn't over, but now you're in control. See you in the next one.